So oh my, Magomed Ankalaev, if he wasn't already the #1 contender, last night he certainly stamped his name as the guy that will likely fight for the belt at 205 next. Emphatic KO finish of Johnny Walker. You know, Ankalaev, the one word that comes to mind when I think of him as a fighter is economical. And then I guess if there was a second one, it would be technical. And a lot of times he gets criticized kind of for the way he fights. He's sort of boring, a little bit slower, whatnot. But to me, it's just calculated. He's waiting to look for his opponent's weaknesses and then exploit them. And he's a guy who's got 10 wins in a row right now, notwithstanding the draw and the no contest to Johnny Walker. He's on a 10-fight win streak. And so certainly it seems like he's going to be fighting Alex Pereira next. There's been some tweets between Glover Teixeira and Magomed that would certainly allude to the fact that that camp wants to take him on as the next challenger for the belt. So one, what do you make of Magomed's performance? And two, do you think a emphatic KO victory of Johnny Walker is enough to springboard you into a title fight?
Absolutely. And before I get into the X's and O's of what happened last night and how impressive he looked, we got to talk about the biggest misconception in all of MMA right now. And Ankalaev has played with it, maybe worse than anybody. People saying that he's a boring fighter or that he's, not that entertaining or exciting to watch. They just need to, wipe some water in their eyes or something, because he's going out there and he's finishing everybody. And it's not like he's taking them to the ground, beating them up, eating up minutes on the clock, and then choking them out. He's going out there and knocking out really explosive strikers. I mean, if I would have told you last night that, all right, somebody's going to get knocked out emphatically, put to sleep between Johnny Walker and Ankalaev, who do you think would do it? A lot of people would probably say Johnny Walker.
For sure.
But man, the explosive striker got a taste of his own medicine last night. Ankalaev goes out there, he's got dynamite in his hands, and he's putting hands on everybody. Even if he does look a little bit more calculated and looks like he's sticking to his game plan, and that seems to come off as patient, people need to understand that what he's doing is he's basically figuring out these very high-level fighters and finding openings in their game and finding weaknesses, and then he's exploiting them. And 9 times out of 10, he's getting them out of there before the fights even has a chance to go to the judges. So people need to understand that Ankalaev is very exciting, and the misconception that the entire world needs to get with the program with is that these guys that come from Dagestan, these guys that come from Team Khabib, if you will, aren't boring wrestlers. These guys are high-level strikers, and now they're starting to show us that this new stable of them, of course they're great grapplers. Of course they know how to finish the fight if it gets to the ground, and they know how to take you there if they need to. But you look at Umar Nurmagomedov, Usman Nurmagomedov, Saeed, I know he's not a relative, but Saeed Nurmagomedov. You look at Ankalaev.
Islam winning by head kick these days.
Exactly. This is the type of fighter that these guys are coming out to be. And I really do think that Ankalaev is one of the most explosive, powerful strikers that 205 has seen in a while. And if he's able to go in there and take what I thought was for sure a #1 contender's performance in there with Alex Pereira, I think not only on the ground will Alex potentially find himself in trouble, but he could find himself in trouble on the feet as well.
Yeah, and the one thing, Johnny Walker looked enormous last night.
Yeah,
you normally don't see somebody, when Magomed Ankalaev is in the cage with somebody, that he actually looks small, but he did look substantially smaller than Johnny Walker did. And so that was kind of concerning to me before the fight began. I was like, okay, Walker might be able to just kind of explode with some power shots, and we'll see how Magomed handles the pressure and the power and the speed and also the unorthodox way of striking that Johnny Walker is going to bring to the table, because that will kind of tell us a lot with how he might do against Pereira, because Pereira is a little bit more in the framework of Muay Thai. He's not as free-flowing. You're not going to see any capoeira out of Alex Pereira like we saw in the first round with Johnny Walker. But in the similar way that he's very strong and explosive and powerful, it'll be interesting to see how Magomed sort of mitigates that and if he's able to handle it. Yeah. And he handled it in spades. He moved around. He was smart. He looked for his openings. He saw some vulnerabilities and some reads that he made on Walker, and he was able to absolutely shut the lights out. So I think that told us what we need to see to say that he is for sure ready to take on Alex Pereira in a title fight next. And to your point about the Dagestani fighters, especially fighters like Magomed Ankalaev, being deemed as quote-unquote boring, the vast majority of wins that, first of all, Magomed Ankalaev pretty much wins every fight that he's in. I think he's got 1 loss in his record, 1 draw, and 1 no contest. So I think he's like 18-1, 1-1. Or
a whole lot of good versus a little bit of bad.
Exactly. And so 11 of those have come by way, I believe 11 or 12 by knockout, and 6 have of his 10 victories in the UFC are by knockout. So he is a knockout artist by statistics purely. So I think that people need to wise up to the fact that the Jan Blachowicz fight was just weird. It wasn't a great fight. And I get how people were a little bit disappointed. You have the Polish power versus this guy who's supposed to be the next big thing. And the fight kind of falls flat on its face. But there again, Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou, I don't think anybody would say that either one of them is a boring fighter.
Right.
However, sometimes you get a boring fight once in a blue moon. You
Oil
know what
and
I
water
mean?
don't mix.
Yeah, it happened one time with Derek and Francis when they were in there together. It happened with Magomed with Jan, but I think we move past that now and just accept the fact that Ankalaev is one of the top guys at 205.
Yeah, and quickly to touch on the Jan Blachowicz fight, the only reason that was a draw, in my opinion, is because the judges got involved and they didn't know what they were watching. Ankalaev won that fight, and Jan Blachowicz was even the first one to say it and admit that. So I really do think that if Ankalaev has to do more heavy lifting, there's not that many people left at 205 for him to fight. And I'd rather see him just kind of sit back and see what happens. You know, Alex Pereira did that cryptic tweet that we don't really know about. It's like 3 plus 300 plus 30, whatever that was. That sort of made me think that he might be going up and trying to fight Tom Aspinall at heavyweight. Obviously, heavyweights in all sorts of problems right now. We don't know where exactly the belt lies or who has the real belt or who doesn't. But I think if Alex Pereira does decide to defend his belt at 205 next, it should be against Ankalaev, just because there's not that many more people at the top of 205 that deserve it more than Ankalaev, if anybody. And also, you got to go with the health. You know, Jamal Hill's not ready to fight right now. You got Ratchett and Blachowicz that just got pulled off of this past weekend's card, and I think they're going to get pushed a couple weeks, maybe even next to the pay-per-view next weekend. But Ankalaev is number 3, so there's not much more space for him to move up unless you start taking people out of the rankings that didn't do any fighting, so they didn't win or they didn't lose. And that's why I do feel like Ankalaev, even though that draw against Blachowicz sort of set him back, and then the people didn't really love to see him, you know, complaining, if you will, about it. I thought he won that fight and had every right to complain that the judges got it wrong. But, you know, this is the sport. People want to see the highest level of sportsmanship and just conceding anything at any moment. So I think Ankalaev now has shown us that, you know, he did more heavy lifting. He went back to the drawing board, got himself a couple more wins, and now he's ready for his title shot. And honestly, if he fights Alex Pereira, whether they take it to the floor or stay up on the feet and trade, I think he's got a really good shot at winning that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to talk about too, because he did say that he's going to finish Alex Pereira with his hands. He's not going to take it to the ground and try to exploit Pereira, where a lot of people think that he has a weakness on the ground. He said, look, I'm going to stand up and do exactly what he wants me to do. I'm going to be right there in front of him, and I'm going to show you that I'm the better striker. Yeah. So talk about making a fight harder for yourself than it has to be. Now, whether he'll do that or whether that's just talking points and kind of posturing to get this fight is yet to be determined. But if he decides to stand and trade with Alex Pereira, we got a super exciting light heavyweight title fight on our hands soon.
For sure, and getting the graces from Glover Teixeira was all he needed. Glover and Alex Pereira are like this. And if he says this is who you need to fight next, not only because the rankings, you know, show that or indicate that, but also if you want to prove your legacy and prove that you're truly already a Hall of Famer, Alex Pereira, then you need to take this guy out. And Magomed Ankalaev is about as perfect as you can look at 205.
You got that right.